So we're sitting here in the project space and sample studios in Cork, surrounded by some of your work that is ready to go up for your solo show, Kevin Mooney, Revenants in IMMA. Do you want to talk a little bit about where this research started?
This body of work really, and all the research that kind of fed into it, would have started when I did my MFA in NCAD. One of the early kind of conversations I would have had with tutors when I was there would have been about how painters from Germany or from other countries, they can use their own kind of visual cultures as almost like a library, that they can just kind of pluck things from the air and kind of use them. That's much more problematic for an Irish artist. I was starting to look at all the centuries where we kind of don't have much evidence of a material culture because of our history of emigration, particularly after kind of the Cromwellian era, and our historical links between Ireland and the Caribbean, which is a really, really fascinating part of our history. So I suppose I kind of started to kind of reimagine what an art history might look like, and also what kind of art history might have developed among Irish people in terms of the other cultures that they would have encountered on their emigrational journeys. Like, for example, in Barbados or Montserrat or Jamaica, or which is where Irish people would have emigrated to in the 16th and 17th centuries. So it's looking at an art history from the point of view of a future that never happened.
And I think what's interesting as people move through these spaces is that they're very different painterly languages. There seems to be work that might be from different hands almost.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of considered it as being all works that were made by multiple artistic personae, that they were all made by different artists, but the artists all lived on this kind of fictional island which had this Irish/Caribbean cultures.
And that has directly fed into the ways in which we've kind of curated this show. This work will be in the courtyard galleries in IMMA, which have this really elegant, kind of lofty proportions, but also have a sense of kind of domestic spaces about them, with their beautiful, graciously proportioned windows and these fireplaces with mantelpieces. And so we have thought about the ways in which this work will kind of inhabit these spaces.
Yeah, and of course the courtyard galleries and all of IMMA has it has a history as a military hospital for the British Army. We were thinking about these kind of presences kind of haunting this space, so almost like the fever dreams of the soldiers or something like that,
And there is something quite confrontational in your work. I'm thinking specifically about the motif that reappears through your paintings of these lidless floating eyeballs. Do you want to talk a little bit about how they function for you?
They kind of reference a history of portraiture. They're almost like partial portraits, or portraits that aren't complete. So they're kind of somewhere in between coming into being and passing away. Some of them are going to be exhibited over the fireplaces. They're almost like these kind of haunted kind of objects rather than being portraits themselves,
So one of the ways in which you explore these ideas of different cultures coming into contact is through the kind of materials that you use.
A lot of the paintings that are in the show would be a combination of oil, acrylic and distemper on jute, actually. Jute is also known as Hessian, which has it has a history of global trade. It has that connotation of goods being moved around the world, and therefore people and culture and ideas also traveling with them,
And that's really interesting because you explore the ways in which aesthetic ideas circulate and change when they come into contact with other ideas.
Yeah, and sometimes in very unexpected ways. This painting that's behind us, Blighters, this borrows its composition from a painting by Vincent van Gogh, which is called The Potato Eaters. When I first saw that when I was a teenager, there was an instant kind of recognition almost, like it just seemed like a painting that belonged in the Irish canon, even though it wasn't, Peasants sitting in a darkened cabin, potatoes, it was just like all these clichés of Irishness,
I wanted to ask you about storyteller that again draws on a linchpin of Irish education.
It's Peg Sayers, really. It's a kind of a very loose portrait of Peg. So she was this amazing kind of shanachie and storyteller. She's always photographed with this clay pipe. There's clay pipes and smoke, and her shawl is in the painting,
heads or partial heads or references to heads reappear through your work. I wonder if you could talk about the weirds for a minute.
The weirds were another name for the three fates. It does reference a painting by Goya, one of the black paintings, you know, and thinking about fictional painters that might have come from Ireland and, you know, the influences that they might have kind of picked up from mainstream European painting, like Goya would be an obvious one.
Goya's particularly dark aesthetic language might have chimed with your fictional or your imagined Irish painters of the 17th century.
Exactly, yeah.
And as these three heads are floating off, you also get this idea of the ways in which influence travels and cultures spread.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.